Okay, so that gets us to Heidegger's legacy. Um, yeah, so I mentioned postmodernism. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think that form of philosophy would really exist with him. If yeah, if you call it philosophy, it's a very like controversial area. People, yeah, like I think it's been a bit misunderstood, but yeah, I think if you go back to like Heidegger's work, then you start to understand like where postmodernism was coming from, like the
Mm.
work of like Derrida, like wouldn't have existed without Heidegger.
Mm.
Um, yeah, but yeah, it's been like there's been like this. I feel like these very reductive derivatives of it, where they're just like, oh, reality is a social construct, which
Mm.
is I think so yeah, so like oversimplifying that it really distorts what his insights were.
I see.
Um, but yeah, then yeah, and yeah, it was just kind of controversial from the start because like philosophy kind of split off, as I said, into like Carnap had this big controversy with him where he accused him of just
Mm.
engaging in like nonsensical metaphysics, and then like yeah, and Heidegger said that Carnap hadn't abandoned his own metaphysical assumptions. So yeah, there's been this side of philosophy that's trying to like clarify logic and how we speak about science in order
Mm.
to have like true knowledge, and then this other side that's exploring more of Heidegger's thought and like how
Mm.
like truth and knowledge is essentially historically embedded. And there are also people who read like Wittgenstein in that light.
Mm.
So there's some like proponents from like from both sides of that era of philosophy, where Wittgenstein was seen as like started as more of a logician and started asking like similar questions as Heidegger.
So who are the main Heidegger successor, or who are the main philosophers developing Heidegger's thoughts?
Um, Most famously, probably Derrida,
Mm.
Jacques Derrida. Was like a French philosopher from the 60s and
Oh,
70s.
so he's still alive?
No, he died in like I think late 90s or early
Oh, I see.
2000s. Yeah.
And how about some alive ones?
Oh, jeez. Well, there are a lot of people in like divinity, like theology, um, like in divinity schools. Uh,
Studying Heidegger?
oh yeah,
Huh.
and I feel like there's more effort to. Yeah, I mean, like the when I was just like an undergrad taking some of these classes, but the professor I had kind of worked to like put like Derrida's work back in dialogue with like some like analytic philosophers like Quine from Harvard who are
Mm.
working more in like mathematical logic.
Mm.
So like there's been attempts to reunify them, and I think there are people looking at Heidegger as more in like in an analytical lens now.
Oh, I
Um,
see.
yeah, there's like books about him coming out like every year. Uh, yeah, he's like his importance I don't think has diminished, but yeah, there's been some like problematic trends in like postmodernism that I feel like have kind of petered out.
So his work now is more used on analytics and logic.
um, well, not like basically like the whole philosophy of language.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like he has a very unique contribution to that. Like that's sort of like the turn in the 20th century. There's like more interest in language and how that constitutes
Mm.
knowledge. And
I
he
see.
has a very interesting contribution to that I don't think you can dismiss.
So do you think his work or he will be mentioned in natural language processing or knowledge based AI?
No.
That's a very quick no. Do you need to think twice?
No, yeah. The computer science department, like, I mean, yeah, they might glance at it for like a second and they'd be like, no. I mean, he's like the other thing is he's like his work's very hard, like it's very forbidding. Like I think it's very rewarding to understand, but yeah, it's not something people just pick up and are like, oh, this might be useful. Like you have to, like yeah, most of the scholarship on him is just like putting lots of effort into like understanding him.
So do you think understanding Heidegger would help in natural language processing or knowledge based AI?
I think it would help like clarify some of the difficulties they face at least.
What
Like it,
difficulties?
like just of like like I mean like some of the AI projects like they're basically trying to like replicate like knowledge of universals. Like they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to see like common essences and things. Like he's like his work kind of shows why that's not such a straightforward question,
Mm-hmm.
or why we can't assume that there's an answer to that in the way we have like like even like linguistic phenomena. I think he shows how like deep and mysterious they are. Like even the way we name things or the way we understand grammar.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not just like it's not like you can just it's like the way you can just perform like a physical analysis, or you can like use brain scans to understand the essence of a sentence.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like rooted in time in a way that like physical matter isn't. So I think I think he really showed how like the phenomenon of language was like really in a different class than like other scientific objects. The way it's like constituted within experience.
Mm. Well, I guess that's why we feed the algorithm or the AI a lot of examples, a lot of stats. That's
Yeah,
sort of the experience.
I mean, yeah, they like most of the approaches have been successful, but yeah, they've just been like stochastic, right? They're just like statistical approximations,
Mm-hmm.
like based on like existing, um, like yeah, based on like existing discourse.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think he shows why you might not be able to like you couldn't really get a computer to like digest a sentence and really get to like its meaning isn't something that can exist independently
Mm-hmm.
of like the actual statement, and like it has like its own historicality that like when it's like when it's like transferred to a different time it changes, you know.
I see.
Yeah, it starts to open up all sorts of interesting questions, and
Mm.
yeah, just with that with the way like being and time interrelates basically.
Mm.
um yeah, and you can see just how radical it was and how he like questioned epistemic progress in general,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
with like the broken hammer,
Mm.
that like there isn't like a true essence to like go out and find. It's something that's sort of like constituted in these existential projects.
Mm.
And yeah, and this like later in his later philosophy becomes like the way that like we're like sort of alienated from the question of being, or the way we like break down and lose track of it. It becomes like something that's like a fundamental condition of knowledge.
Mm.
That like a way to put it is that being is only uh, that being at the start is concealed, and it's only revealed insofar as it's concealed. That as like we illuminate some aspects of beings, like
Mm.
others, I meant to say recede, sorry.
Oh.
Like others recede into the background.
Oh.
But so yeah, this like that's a very interesting side of his later thought, that like there is no like there isn't going to really be like a final answer to being.
I see. So after reading Being in Time, how is your life changed?
uh I wouldn't I wouldn't say he's like your philosopher if you're looking for like life advice.
There's no life limit. It's just like how you think, like anything you feel different, like do different, like any different.
I mean, yeah, definitely like think differently. And
About what? Like what's the before and after?
I guess I don't have like this common sense picture of how we achieve knowledge anymore. That it's just something that we discover through work, or that we're fundamentally making like epistemic progress,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is like the Enlightenment view, right? Like that we're that we're like science like brings us to like a more enlightened state where we do without gods, and like yeah, like yeah, like Heidegger's definitely like a critic of that, of just like the whole Enlightenment project.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like it definitely opens your mind to a lot of that. I don't know if I like some of it's like yeah, yeah, I don't know like how seriously you should take it, and it shouldn't like I'm not saying we should like, and I don't think he like you should read his thought and think like, oh, it's just a way to like you should just reject science, like we're not gonna have any eternal essences. Like I mean, he shows that like truth can become like operative, like technically operative in certain ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think it just I mean, it just like teaches you to be sort of like critical about and like to think about like the foundations of knowledge, like the way those are actually like historically formed.
Mm-hmm.
So that yeah, like it definitely like it makes you start like thinking more deeply about you know like the explanations you have for like mathematics and science. Like you know, is there like some like is there some reason that we explain it in this way and not some other? It
But
just
mathematics and science are all very logical. They all have some base. Like for example, the proving mathematics.
but yeah, I think he shows like like even some of our mathematical forms like they have a historical origin you can trace. Like we thought about space differently after Descartes.
Mm-hmm.
We also thought about it differently after Einstein.
Mm-hmm.
And like he kind of shows that as we adopt this understanding of being that like other potential manifestations are left out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why he like yeah, I think I've told you he's very pessimistic about technology later in his life
Mm-hmm.
because for him like technology is like another word for this way that being emerges within history. He calls its essence in framing, this way of like fixing it into like almost like a resource
Mm-hmm.
instead of letting it emerge for itself. It's like fixed into something that has like technical potential
Mm-hmm.
or a technical purpose.
Okay, that can be another episode because I disagree.
Yeah, we could. I mean, we argue enough about that in our free time. But yeah, and also, yeah, like I said, I think it can only go so far. Like you can't, like it's not like questioning the reality of any scientific results. Like I think, I think you would agree that there is definitely like reality to like the particles that we observe and things like that.
Mm.
But he's just saying that. But he's just questioning to what degree it can be called like universal knowledge,
Mm.
and that's not like historically determined in any way.
Is 1
because
plus 1 equals to 2 a universal knowledge?
I, I I think we can claim that to be like universal, at least like I mean, but like he might say that like the forms in which that operates and the way it's like the way it becomes useful knowledge is different within each period.
But 1 plus 1 equals 2 is universal knowledge.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, he actually has a very interesting article called the Age of the World Picture, I think,
Mm.
where he talks about like the Greek concept of mathematics, and he derives it from I think it's like ta mathemata, but it means like things that are taught, and he explains like he translated it as like teaching things that are already known.
Mm-hmm.
That's what mathematics is, and it's
Mm-hmm.
sort of like that's sort of what Plato said he was doing, like like he was like giving access to like truths that people already had access to through
Mm-hmm.
recollection,
Mm-hmm.
and that's like how Plato explains like universal knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like what he was getting at there is that like things that are already known? Is that like the knowledge about things like that? Mathematics, I think, presupposes like an ontology, like some understanding of what things are. So like, I think he was getting like, for him, like the question of being is always presupposed by these sciences, even if there is like knowledge that can be like universal atop that.
So there is universal knowledge.
Yeah, but yeah, he sort of has a different understanding of what truth is. Like he sees it not as like, he thinks like the whole correspondence theory, that it's just like your mind like becoming, it's like your mind being adequate to the forms of actual things, like having a form in your mind that corresponds to them. So he thinks that's like a mistaken view of truth. He sees it, he translates truth as like aletheia, which he calls like unconcealedness. It's this way of like being becoming present. So yeah, and there's it's also all part of like the linguistic turn that like there aren't truths that are independent of language, that but like our understanding of being emerges within language, and it's always like a partial view of things. And yeah, we talked about technology, but that becomes like philosophically important in his work. So yeah, that's like, yeah, that's something. There's definitely a lot of thoughts there, but yeah, it becomes like sort of frustrating because yeah, there's like there are times where he says like you kind of like want him to explain like what this higher thing is, and then there are times where he just says like there are questions about being that can't be resolved into sense. He uses the German word Sinn, and like my professor said like this is what will drive philosophers just like to drink for years. So you can't really get a clear explanation, even though like I think they are pretty convincing like questions that he raises.
I see.
He just doesn't have an answer.
Okay.
Yeah, he used to say things like, in his final work, he used to say things like, only a god can save us.
Yeah, my brain is dead now, I think.
Yeah, it gets sort of divine and mystical.
Yeah, can't wrap my mind around.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool, we can stop there.
Alright, thanks for watching.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, feel free to leave any comments, questions below. Bye.
Thanks.